Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Recovery Live, Came to Believe Recovery's weekly live stream where we discuss everything addiction and all the solutions around it and everything that goes with it, every subject. Um, it's a beautiful day here in New Jersey today. We had some really warm weather last week. It's not that warm today, but it's a beautiful sunny day. I don't know how it is in the UK or out in California today. When I was there last week, it was raining. Valerie will tell us today. I got a couple of announcements, guys. Some really great news. Our Nevada City retreat that's coming up in 2 weeks. That's not in Nevada, which a lot of people think. It's Nevada City. It's in California, outside of Auburn, which is outside of Sacramento, if that gives you some perspective. Guys, the interest has been so great that we had to increase our housing this week and call them and add more spaces. And we may have to add more spaces. It'll be the biggest retreat we've ever had in Nevada City. So we're really, really excited. We've got a great volunteer team coming out. California's really gotten on board with what we're doing and the idea that you could be recovered if this is for you in a weekend and go on to live a life happy, joyous, and free. So we're so happy about what's coming up. Lot of work, right? Cass will be, her head's going up and down in the backstage with the work that's going on. And Valerie's head is going up and down too, because the work is going on there going on that comes to it. Also, I want to let you guys know that there was a retreat in England also last weekend in Hertz, which is phenomenal. I hear they had wonderful success as well, where people were transformed by hearing this message and getting a jump start on life and be able to go on after a weekend and get started living a program that can continue to make them free and happy and joyous and watch them grow in success. Some other great announcements too. We're going to be very active in New York City over the summer. You guys heard me talk about St. Anthony's Shelter for Renewal in the South Bronx that we took a team into back in October. And it was the first time that we'd done anything quite like this. And what I mean by quite like this is we stayed at the shelter with the guys in the shelter. Now, we weren't in with them. We had our own floor, but it wasn't much. But the team went in and we taught at the shelter. And we've had contact with them. And a very encouraging sign was that Father Ignatius, who runs the shelter, it's a Franciscan shelter, told us that he didn't really need the links to the virtual retreat, which was January, because everybody was doing so well. And they hadn't had much turnover or any turnover. And the turnover they had were people that went on to get apartments and moved. Their life had moved on, not back to the street. So that was great news. Then I went this week and had a meeting with Father Ignatius. And before I could say anything, he said, we need you to come back. There's a whole new group there because every 6 months it turns over programmatically to a whole new group of people. And he told me this, only one person had relapsed in the 6 months. So out of the 40 odd men that we showed this program, one relapsed. That puts our ratio really, it was such heartwarming to me to know that this thing can get caught on. And so we're going back in June to take the team back in to St. Anthony's, and we're going to go through with a whole new group of guys. We've also gotten an opening at a facility in Manhattan in Kips Bay, and we'll be running a retreat in August there. And then we're looking at running one potentially in the Bronx, a different part of the Bronx, in July. So big footprint coming in New York City. So encouraging to know that we're going to be able to, in a big way, be able to bring our message to those that are hurting. And if they want to hear it, we just want to be one of the tools on it. When I bring Casie on, I am going to ask her to do the dance she was doing behind the scenes while the music was going on. Did you see that, Cass? Casie was doing quite a dance. I was very distracted. I was like, she's having fun all alone back there by herself. Anyway, today, guys, what we're going to talk, and we've talked about this before, is so now I'm going to let her compose herself because she's just lost it in the back, right? We've talked about the family before. Clarence Snyder used to say the family gets sick together, the family needs to get well together. And that's a big part of what Came to Believe does, is as we we present our step retreats, it's open to everybody, and we encourage family members to come. We encourage family members to come to weekly meetings that are run. They're open meetings in the AA sense, and we know that healing in the family is as important for the addict that it is for the family member who's had to, in many cases, really suffer for it. And we'll talk some stories that I was thinking about in my life, how I tortured my family for years and years and years. And so that's our discussion today. If you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, put them in our comment section. I know that my guests would be happy to answer from their perspectives as well as me. So without any further ado, I would like to bring my two guests on today. First guest is recurring. You guys all know her. She's been on before. Casie, she's a Jersey girl coming on, and she's not doing her. There it is.
Doing my dance. There you go.
I was like, wow, it's like the 60s in here, which I like. So anyway, and from Oroville, California, a very good friend, Valerie Marsh, is joining us today.
Hello.
Hey, Valerie.
Hello. I'll do this.
She's How's the weather today in Oroville, Valerie?
It's beautiful. It's probably about 60 degrees right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe not.
60.
Yeah, it's
going to be 75.
It's supposed to be 75 today.
Oh.
And our lovely dam is full of water, which is really nice because last year it was very, very low. So my husband's happy he can go fishing in his boat.
Right, that's great. It's great to have you two on and talking about different perspectives of the family and the addiction. As isn't a secret, I was the addict in my family, and I actually was the only one out of 6 kids. My brothers and sisters were not at least drug addicts, and their brokenness didn't show up that way. I don't know what brokenness they do have, but I was the addict, and I know that I traumatized my family. I was thinking back to what I did, and some of the stories will come out because it's important to tell, I think, and to realize that the damage that goes on in an addict in families. And, while I'm just soused, numb with drugs, your family is dead sober, worried to death and anxious and paying consequences they didn't ask for. Right. And it's such an insidious disease. It affects family members many times as much as the addict, as far as emotionally and spiritually, even and maybe even physically. My mother said she didn't sleep for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Well, when she knew I was out, she said, and how do you do that to somebody? Not to get too deep, but I couldn't have cared less when she said that. Couldn't have cared less. Think about the control that this substance had over me, that my mother would say that, and I could not bring the power together to not do it, to let her sleep at night. I'd say, well, just get over it. How does that work? Right, guys? Just get over it. That's a great thing to do. Right. So I know that Casie is part of a family dealing with addiction, and she was one. And Valerie is what we call a normie, although I know Valerie. And there's nothing. She's not a normie. Anyway.
Oh boy.
And no, I'm kidding. But Valerie, had a long experience, I think, or a significant experience living with the alcoholic. That was Dale. And she already told us backstage, she's not going to tell us any stories. She's not going to give us any dirt on Dale. I thought we might get some fun stuff, but luckily, Dale's pretty open with his stuff, so he'll probably tell us the next time we see him. Anyway, I'd love to, start the conversation, I guess, with how, I guess, Casie, how today, when you look back, just in a 30,000 foot view here, when you look back, how do you feel about the damage that was caused in the family? Like, what is it like? I'm thinking that today, how much I can't believe how I was.
This is actually kind of an interesting conversation. So I think you know that our son has been home back from kind of his journey through residential the last 2 years. And I don't know if I said this last time, but I think he's found a path through becoming a personal trainer. And
Oh yeah.
he has been I'm going to announce that, but I know it's not a straight path, but he's been sober of everything for the last 6 weeks. So that's so that I take the wins where not they happen, and accept that that doesn't mean that it's a straight path, but the fact that he knows and has found what is working for him is fantastic. And when I start to talk positively with him and like, look at all these things, he goes, please do not forget what I did. Like, don't
Oh.
let that leave your vision. Like, because I need to be held accountable myself of I flipped tables on you. Like he flipped a table on me, dented the fridge. He punched a hole in a wall. He and I wrestled physically over his phone because I was trying to get him to stop texting his drug dealer to come, well, Snapchatting his drug dealer to come to the house. And it became like just a physical altercation. Like, and he's a strong kid and I'm not. And running away and being gone for, a day, 2 days, and having the police looking for him and having it on Facebook, looking for him. And he said, you need to remember that is a truth and don't try to candy coat it.
Well said.
And I was like, oh, but it's so much easier just to candy coat. That wasn't that hard. Right, Valerie?
Yeah.
It's easy to want a candy coat, just like having a child. After the childbirth, you forget how hard it was. It's kind of like that's where I feel like, and I can fall into that. And he tries to remind me not to. So I'd really like to hear your experience.
My experience, one that I remember very vividly, is we had been to a Christmas party, and Dale had some to drink, and he says, I have to go out to go deliver something. And I knew it probably wasn't true, but he ended up in the Russian River area. And that was, I think, our daughter, she was probably 6 months old. And he overcorrected and he flipped his truck upside down, and it was totally immersed in the Russian River. I knew I was going to get a phone call that night. I just had the intuition that something was not right, but he is bigger than I am, and I was not going to wrestle with him for the keys. But that's what happened. He climbed up the embankment. He flagged somebody down. He called me and he said, I just messed up my truck. That's all he said. And I'm going to stay here tonight. And probably a half an hour later, he said, can you come and get me? So I came and got him. He climbed up the embankment. The car was totally immersed. He rolled the window down very calmly, I guess, unhooked the seatbelt, climbed out of the window, and got out of the immersed car and climbed up an embankment. So I would think that something like that would stop you from drinking. I thought that was a big wake-up call. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And we were probably married 4 years at that point. So, that still resonates in my mind.
How did that make you feel, Val? Had you felt the powerlessness? Had you realized there's not a whole lot you can do? Had you been trying to get him to stop or doing any, the things that some of the people who our loved ones try to do to get us to stop?
Okay. That was just the very beginning of it.
Oh,
So he did 9 years of the abuse, alcohol and drugs. But that was one of the ones that really, like I say, resonated in my mind.
right.
And, our oldest daughter was, I don't know, I think she was probably must have been a month or 2 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And Like I say, I know you can't make them stop, but I would have thought that that would have been a big wake up call. He's lucky he survived that.
My son's actually said this, Valerie, that it makes that driving high is fun.
Yeah, no. And what's kind of funny is that when he was climbing up the embankment, he was grabbing onto like some vines. And then when I brought him home, he sat in the bathtub. It turned out those vines were poison oak, so he was covered with it.
Oh boy.
So double whammy on that one. But that was one that I just knew I was going to get a phone call that night. I don't know why. It was just the intuition. But like I say, he's a lot bigger than I am, and I'm not going to argue with him. And one thing I did say is if he ever ended up in jail, that he could sit there all night, because I was not going to go pick him up, because I was not going to be that codependent to do that. And thank goodness he never ended up, calling me saying, hey, I'm in jail overnight. Can you come bail me out?
When I was drinking and when I was drugging, and the way I treated my family was I lied, cheated, and stealed. I would and do things like, and was very, very insensitive. And the lying and manipulating was crazy. I'll be right back, and come back 2 days later all the time. No, I'm really going to do this. I mean, we lie to cover the lie. And I had several conversations, I think, with the family afterwards about that. And we'll talk a minute about how hard it is sometimes for family who have been the brunt of the abuse to get over it. Sometimes they're the last ones to get over it. And I'll tell you a couple of stories that were frustrating to me and have been frustrating to people I've sponsored. But how did that affect you guys when you knew you were being lied to over and over again, if that was the case, and you knew that when they went out, they were going to go? How did that affect you?
I have done a lot of personal therapy over the last couple of years, and I will tell you, I mean, you guys, Valerie, I've been sober for now over 2 years, and that sobriety has given me openness to go into therapy and look at my childhood and stuff that happened then. So I learned that a lot of my childhood I was gaslit by family because of things that happened, which we talked about another time. People can go watch that in the past video. So that actually was very hard for me, because I learned what that looks like, what that feels like, how that feels in my body, and to have my child gaslighting me, it was added an extra layer of discomfort and triggering, and I turned it on myself as I must be wrong, I must be bad. Now wait a minute, and then I'm like, wait a minute, you were lying the whole time. But you still have that moment where you're like, oh, maybe this time he's not lying. Every time it's so not true. Every time I have that thought, then I know that he's lying. I don't know if that's true for you, Valerie, but literally I've learned that if I have that thought, then that little warning bell is going, oh, he's lying. And
you've got that gut feeling, and you know that, correct? Yep. Yeah.
It's hard.
It is. I look at our relationship as when we got married. It's true, love is blind, right? You overlook all this stuff. And the abuse and stuff, it's like a wall, and that brick is going up one by one. And I think that's a really good analogy. Well, those bricks don't come down overnight. It takes a lot of work. And to know that you're not going to be lied to anymore. And so those bricks did not come down overnight.
Yeah. My bricks still aren't down. So
yeah.
Well, Val, you made a really great point about the bricks got built one by one. So the whole wall wasn't built in a day either.
No.
Right.
You got programmed, and the wall went up, and was it a coping? It was a way to somehow, you had to build some kind of wall to figure out how to deal with this. because you didn't. This wasn't the deal you made, right?
No, correct. It was not a deal I made. I didn't realize how bad it was. So the first 9 years of our marriage, that's what he did.
We are masters at hiding who it is and how bad it really is. You know, at one point I used to, when I was drinking in front of the family, I'd have 2 glasses of wine, right? And I had the bottle of vodka in the cabinet in the sink. So I'd have 2 glasses of wine and then I'd go get a soda, chug some of it and pour the vodka in it. The appearance was Tom only had 2 drinks, you know, and I could handle my drinks pretty well. But this is the kind of stuff that starts to drive people crazy. Is he, because I could make it look like it wasn't so bad. But then how come you don't come home for 3 days at a time? So the real hard drinking, I hardly ever showed to the family. But they knew it behind the scenes because all the consequences and all the things that were happening. It's had to be just baffling to them. Did Dale do? Yeah, go ahead.
Family figures it out.
Yeah.
We're not blind. We know what's going on. Yeah.
Well, we don't think so. We don't think you know.
Oh, I can just pull the wool over their eyes and they're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that must be so frustrating, as you know, they're trying to pull the wool over. You know, we're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And I mean, from Casie, from your point, you pulled the wool over and now you're getting the wool pulled over, you know, or trying to, the whole gaslighting thing. I love that, gaslighting. I mean, it's a terrible thing, but what a term, right? It is what happens when they tell us and we all start to agree. Yeah, maybe we are wrong. Wait, shh. You know? Yeah.
Well, and I will tell you, so for my children, actually, my drinking got worse in response to my stress of that became my self-care when everything was blowing up with each of the kids. And that became my self-care. And then at 4:00, that became my self-care. And that's why I was, taking care of myself. Anyway, it's a common event that happens for some of us when we get older. That becomes self-care. And then it starts to take over, which makes sense. But my kids would even gaslight me because, you would black out, right? And they would tell me that I agreed to things. That I didn't know I agreed to. My son, who's been doing this a lot longer than me, got me sober because I saw and understood. And I now know that much quicker because of myself acknowledging in myself what my behaviors are. Before, yes, he could hide a lot more, but since the last 2 years, not so much, because I know more and I understand more, and I still, have my vices. My Coke Zero is my vice, and it's got its own journey when you acknowledge it. That hey, there's my part in it. So, I mean, I would love to be a normie, but I'm not a normie.
So that's a good point, Casie, to talk about. I have another, but you just pivoted me. I never felt really like, I was the addict. I don't know if my family, actually later in life, my sister told me that my parents at one point had come to, and they were non-emotional people who ever showed any emotion of any sort ever. That they said, they felt responsible for how I turned out. And they wonder if they could have done anything different. So Val, did you, at any point during the time, did you feel like you were at fault and that you could have been doing something different as a wife? And boy, maybe he wouldn't drink if I, whatever.
I didn't think it was ever my fault. But, I wanted him to quit drinking, but you can't make him to stop drinking because it's got to go from here to here. And if that doesn't happen, you can't do anything. I mean, you can be the best wife in the world and do everything the way they think you should do it. It's still not going to stop them from having the drug or alcohol problem. It's got to be in their heart. It's got to go from their head to their heart. And if that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
So, I mean, it's really important, guys, that's listening. You know, Val comes to retreats now and helps us, and for her to give that message to other Al-Anons that come, that some do try all these things and don't have that, Val. They don't know that yet, that they can't stop them, and it's not their fault. And there are things you can do and set boundaries up so that you're not hurt.
Right.
But until it goes from the head to the heart, probably nothing's going to change.
That's correct. And you can be the most controlling person in the world, but you can't control the addict or the alcoholic.
Wow.
You can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Dale started getting sober. We have 2 daughters. The oldest one, they're like 6.5 years apart. He started going to AA 2 months before our second daughter was born. And, you know, it was a really hard time, but I realized he had to go to meetings. But
Right.
that I had hit my point. And if he hadn't quit drinking at that point before she was born, I don't think I would have stuck around, because I had just had it. And I would have probably gone and lived with my parents. But praise God, he decided that he couldn't live that way anymore. So like I say, 2 months before she was born, he started attending AA. And after she was born, I did go to a couple of Al-Anon meetings. And it was not, for me, I didn't want to go. So I've used other books going forward. I lead a Conquering Codependency, and that's a really good book. And I don't know if I should say that or not, but it is. And we have ladies that come to the group, and that has helped them. So that's what we've done.
It's one of the things that I hear, guys, and this will be interesting for me, Val, to have your point on this. There's lots of stories within addiction in families and marriages and families where, let's say, a marriage where they got together when the addict was active. So they put forth a certain persona and they married them, and they drank for a lot of years and things were bad. And then when they got sober, that's when the real marital problems started in, because they didn't know who this sober person was, who was this different person now. And in a lot of cases, the sobriety part causes a lot of trouble. Did you have any experience like that? But no, I didn't in my family, because when I got sober, they were just so happy. And, you know, they were my parents and my sisters and brothers. So they loved the responsible Tom that showed up. So Casie, I was thinking that was iced coffee, but that's Coke Zero.
That's Coke Zero. Yes, it is.
Coke Zero. Anyway, so, but I have a friend who they're struggling because of this, that the one got sober. They're struggling because the one side of the family raised the kids kind of, and the other one was drunk and then comes sober, and 2 months later wants to start have a say in everything. And, you know, and they're like, what? And not only that, we're having a party for this person who's sober 60 days. And they're like, wait a minute, I was 20 years good. Nobody's throwing me a party. These are real things that go on in families with addiction. All the more reason, guys, why we all need to be talking together, the families, when this goes on. But did you have any of that, Val, when Dale got sober? Any issues that were negative for you? Like you're like, oh, I kind of want the drinking Dale back.
No, I never wanted the drinking. But I will say I'm kind of a controlling person, and I handled all.
You don't have any experience with that.
And you know, he's supposed to be the leader of the house. It was hard to relinquish that. I've done all of the, you know, took care of the girls, took care of the household and all of that stuff. It's hard to relinquish some of that.
How about you, Casie?
Oh yeah. I mean, my son is very controlling. And I would actually say that Sometimes he shows up in a calmer way. So
Mhm.
you having to navigate with him letting go of the substances and how to, because I mean, it's been so long with him since he was 12. So, having to navigate, and he has a hard time navigating with us what being sober. Like, how do we have new conversations and new communication with each other? And that's hard because you get stuck in that path. And that it's easier to talk to you when I'm high, instead of, hey, it's, let's try and re-navigate. And we're working on that. We have family check-ins once a week, and that's what we do to kind of bring, hey, these are the things that we're talking about. This is the things that are happening for our week and what's going on for us this week. And that helps a lot because
So what
we have
about,
to re-navigate that.
how about your husband? You're married still, Casie. How did
Yeah.
he deal with it when you got sober? Now, I don't know any history of him, and certainly don't have to give us his history, but he was with you when you were the drinking, Casie, right?
Yes. We actually had a conversation about this the other day, and he misses being able to go to a brew pub and taste everything together.
Wow.
He misses
Okay.
that part. He wishes there was an in between. He knows there's not an in between, but he misses, because there was for most of our marriage, there was an in between. It's been the last 5 or 6 years where I finally went to the other side. So yeah, he misses being able to do that.
Mm.
But he also doesn't want to go back to that, because I was one of those people who never drove. Once I had a drink, I wouldn't get in the car. And so then it became his responsibility to go and pick up the kids, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was not awesome.
Let's talk about which is part of what we're leading towards here, trust, right? And the breakdown of trust. In my case, I had attempted getting sober a few times. I'd made, you'd lied so many times. It's the boy who cried wolf. It was hard for anybody to believe anything that I did. And how long it took. Now, the rest of the world, it was much easier, and they accepted it. Friends accepted it, and I was treated as a sober, more equal, without that level of mistrust, that little behind the scenes, I don't know, but not the family. And I can remember as much as 10 years sober, just altering my behavior a little bit one night, and it triggered my family. Are you okay? And I was like, are you kidding me? Although I probably said it very differently. Are you kidding? Cass is rolling her eyes because she knows probably what I said.
Yeah.
And it really hurt me. I mean, it was like, when do I stop paying for this? And then I got to think, well, it was 30 years I put them through it. It's only been 10. So, and it was, maybe I got to wait it, but they were triggered by me. So what do I tell people? I'd say, well, you triggered them. Make sure you make a phone call then. Don't alter your behavior. If you're going to alter it, make a phone call. You made them that way, probably, in some cases. But anyway, do you guys have any experiences like that where it took, like Val, initially when Dale was starting to get sober, how long did it take before you really trusted that he was going to do what he said he was going to do, and you could go to bed at night pretty sure he wasn't going to drink?
Good question. I can't really pinpoint it. Maybe a year. Maybe.
So it was that long, though. That's yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Right. So we want it to happen overnight. I'll tell you that, as addicts, because we're like you, Casie. We want to wipe it under the rug. It's over. It's done. Now, happy for me. And 2 months into it, we want everything better again. It's part of in recovery, which we help people realize that we're growing and that everybody has to be given time. How about you, Casie? Any of that?
Yeah, for sure.
Trust issues?
Tough issues for it's interesting. Each of my kids, I'm not going to divulge what each of them have, but each of my kids have their own kind of past that I would consider maybe process addictions. And my youngest, I have full belief that he's done with his and that he's never going back. And I don't know if that's because he's more open about it, whereas my other two are more kind of in recovery, but not like sharing. So I don't know if that's a piece of it. I don't know if that would be, if that's a part of it, is that they're, by them not sharing, there's still that little bit is like, what are they hiding?
Mm.
And that's interesting for me, because I am like my youngest, I'm fully open. Like if I'm struggling that day, I'm having like, oh, this was a rough day. Normally I would drink at that. That's what I say. I would drink at that. I'm not going to, but I would drink at that. I'll have a Coke Zero instead. And so I'm very open about, hey, this is what's coming up for me. So that is a piece for me of when, and maybe that's something that happened for your family. Are you as open? Valerie, is your husband as open? Like, hey, I'm struggling today. I think that makes a difference, because then, for at least for my husband, he says it does, because then he can sit with me, hear it, and know, oh, okay, so this is not just gone. Like, this still comes up for you.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would say that. I think one of the best things that we did, we lived in Fairfield at the time, and we moved up to Oroville. And Dale, my husband, had his friends, his druggy friends and alcohol friends, and I had my friends that didn't like him. So when we moved up to Oroville, I mean, it took a little while. We got involved, and with a church, and the people that we met at our church, didn't know what Dale was like. So we met couples, and that made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I love, that's a real piece for us as addicts when we go someplace new and they didn't know us as addicts, because you get let off the hook, kind of. I remember where I worked at the university before I was doing Came to Believe, but I was sober. When I finally told everybody that I was recovered alcoholic, which I didn't let on initially, at least for 5 years, just because it's the whole they don't understand thing, and it might hurt your career. So still, believe it or not, if you tell them you have cancer, it's okay. You tell them you're an addict, it's not okay, right? Because somehow it's a lifestyle choice. Anyway, one of the big things they all said to me, and Lisa included, I worked with her. Lisa, as you guys know, works with us. They can't picture me like that. Like they couldn't even picture me like that. And I loved that, because it made me feel like I was this new creation. I was transformed in some way, because they couldn't picture any of that. And boy, my family could, though, because they knew it. Even today, the ones that were involved in it, they don't have that anymore. I don't get any of that triggered stuff anymore. But it's 17 years later, it took to do that. We were at Sober St. Patrick's Day, helping them put that on in New York City. We were the only sober people of 250,000. Well, I don't know that we were the only sober people. We were the only sober people with the big sober sign. That's all. I don't know. And we saw some that weren't sober. But one of the talks that went on at the event was by Patrick Kennedy, who's an ex-congressman in the United States. He's of the Kennedy family. And he talked about why, if you're cancer, they start treating it at stage 1, but addiction, they wait till it's stage 4 or 5. Right? It's not touched on. When you're young, if you're doing some risk factors, you start smoking, somebody might tell you, you're at risk for cancer if you do that. And you're like, but when you start drinking, there's not the same warning. So he put forth this proposition that potentially if the conversations got started much sooner in life and some of
Mhm.
the signs were seen, and at least there was education, there was some effort placed, it might save some people. My first drinking, guys, the first time in 8th grade was a blackout drunk. Now, sometimes that's just the first experience someone has drinking and it means nothing. But sometimes it does not mean nothing. It means the switch got flipped. And in
Mhm.
my case, it did. I think back that had there been an effort, an intelligent effort that started then to say, that's not normal how normal people drink. And, I don't know that it might not have gotten me, because even our big book says we believe that at some point in our drinking careers, we could have controlled it until it hit this point where we couldn't. Now that's for me back when I was, so if I said to my parents today, if they said, what could we have done? I said, well, you could have probably done that, but you could have been more, but this was the 70s. It was not the same time frame. Do you feel in that regard, like Val and Casie, well, Val first, that you should have started doing more to Dale, that you could have got him sober sooner had you done something? Do you ever think about that? Had I done this, maybe he would have stopped sooner.
I don't think I could have done anything to have him stop sooner. That being said, background has a lot to do with your family makeup. And Dale's dad and both of his drug brothers, he had an older brother and a younger brother, they all struggled with alcohol. And his younger brother struggled with drugs. So I think that sometimes it's a chemical makeup in your system. And I don't think, in my opinion, with our family, I don't think that would have stopped.
And he was already off to the races once you guys got married. He'd been drinking for a long time anyway, right? So what do you think, Casie, for your kids when they were young? But now you were drinking when they were young, right?
Yeah, I was. It was at that point, it was not out of control. Honestly, it was not. Like I said, it was probably 2018 when it started to get out of control. We had talked about it because my husband's dad was an alcoholic, and my uncle was an alcoholic, and my grandparents were alcoholics. So they actually heard it their whole lives, like from a young age. So what does that say? Like, hey, just be aware that this is a part of your history. This is a part of what can be passed down. And look where my son ended up, and look where I knew, and look where I ended up, because I was able to control it for so long that once it was out of control, then you know what I'm saying? Like, it's we did talk about it. So and it still happened. And even it still happened for me. That being said, we started working with our son so young. He was 16, 17 when we started on the path to help him. And he's 21 and he's doing okay. And he has that words in his brain. Whether or not that will continue and this is permanent, that's not my monkey, not my circus, right? That's his monkey, his circus to figure out. And I trust and believe that he has the tools to do that if like Valerie said, as long as his heart is still in it. And that's, my heart is full. Like, I think I told you that, Tom. When I let go, I let go. Like, it's not even something that I think about ever doing again. So that's just fortunate for me, and that doesn't happen for everybody. I can't remember what that's called, but there's a thing in AA called when that happens. That release does happen for some people.
Hashtag recovered, we call it.
Yeah.
Recovered. Val, I met you like 3 years ago, or is it 4 years now? It might be 4 when I first came out there.
I can't.
But we did a year of, Dale and I, her husband did a year of like trips and things before we did a retreat out in California? Because there was a lot of things about a year before we attempted something in Oroville, which we did.
I think it was 2020 because it's right when COVID was, and we were going to do a retreat at one place up out of Chico, and it had to get canceled. So then I don't think we started until 21.
Right. Okay. But we did that one in-house one at the church. Remember that we did that in 2019. That was in, and I had come out right after the big Paradise fire. Because I remember the first conversation I had with Dale, he said, I'm really busy. I don't have anything. All the people from Paradise are staying at the church. And so whenever the Paradise fire was, I remember that's when Paradise was a huge fire in California, for those that don't know, where 100 people were killed. It swept through the town in like, I don't know, an hour or some crazy number like that, or some short amount of time. But my point is that I want to say, and what I want to talk about now for a minute as we're finishing up is how Dale's recovery has affected you in a positive way. And more specifically, how Came to Believe has affected you, because I met you, Valerie, when you had been involved at some level he was going to AA meetings and you knew, and things but you're directly involved now. You came to a retreat and you may not notice it, but I do. You've changed. You're different than you were a couple of years ago when you started coming to these retreats. What does it mean to you to be involved with really, really involved in his recovery now? I mean, you're very involved. You come to the retreats, you participate, you lead groups, everything. How do you feel changed, if at all?
Well, I think I'm pretty open about it. And if a spouse has issues, that has questions, I'm very free to, if they want my opinion and want how I've dealt with it, I am more than happy to be very open about it. If I can help another wife not have to walk the same path, or give tools to help make a stronger and healthier marriage, I think that's really important.
Have any of the tools helped you? The same tools that we teach the addict?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah.
Because it's a program for anybody.
Yep.
Right? The wisdom of it is,
we all struggle with something. It's not always alcohol and drugs. So
what a thing that pastors want to hear too, Valerie. I have several pastors, Tim Doyle, who comes on, he, as you guys know, will say he knows there's people in his church struggling with things, and they just keep it under wraps. If ever, there's struggles going on, and there's such a weight of freedom. This process, we know, will work for anything if you put it to use. If this is the thing for you and put it to use, we know it's not the thing for everybody. It can work. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on today. We'd love to have you. I know, Casie, you'll come back again. I'm sure you'll come back too, Valerie. Talking about the family, talking about recovery within the family, talking about us is important. And Tim Lewick has to come on and say, "Go Rays." Like, Cass, can you bump him off of our comment thing? Because he says, "No, go Rays, not go Yankees." Are you kidding me? Yeah. And now Cass puts it up for everyone to see. Thanks, Cass. And she's a Yankee fan, Cass is.
Can I add one more thing?
You can absolutely add one more thing.
Okay. When we moved to Oroville, I was totally lost. And if we did not have our church family, I would not have survived. Seriously. That has made a huge difference in our life. That being said, when we started attending church, nobody knew Dale's background. So he was very much accepted. And he didn't stand out as an alcoholic or drug addict that was recovering. So we were very much accepted in our church. And that being said, we do have Wednesday nights and Thursday nights that families can come. That has made a huge difference.
We know that joining faith communities is one of the big things that people do when they come out of recovery, that it's been a big a comfort. And
We
I
see
know it's a comfort for you.
we
Huh?
we see families change.
Families are changed. There's no doubt about it. I wish that it was, Val, that nobody looked at us, the addict, with the stigma any differently, you know, and that sometimes we meet somebody who knows nothing about our background, they think different of you than once they find out about your background.
Right.
And that's part of the mission we have to have, guys, is that it's person first is what we put forth now. They're a person who are suffering from alcohol abuse, or a person with this. But when you put it person first, it levels the field, I think, because somebody else is a person, you know, struggling with whatever they're struggling with, right? Person first always.
Yep.
And that's a good leeway to say, tonight I get to go to Newark and feed the homeless.
Awesome.
And people that are broken. I get to do it, right, Cass? And I'm really looking forward to it, because this is another marginalized group that's stigmatized, and they are absolutely people.
Exactly.
That have a struggle. So let's treat them as people and then help them with the struggle. So I'm going to go do that tonight, partnering with a group that we've of City Relief, which Josiah was on last week, if you saw the show, talking about what that great organization does. So it was a wonderful discussion, ladies, and I look forward to continuing it real soon. We'll talk more about families. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks, Val. We'll be out there in my bedroom at their house. I have my own room at their house, guys.
He even has a bed at our house that he has at home.
Yeah. It's the best bed of anywhere I go around the country, and for my back. When I go there, I'm okay. I know it. It's true. Everywhere I go, I got my room at Val's. I had my room at the Foreman's too, but the bed isn't as good. And now I have my room at Rick Sukalas's, and the bed isn't as good. Val, that bed, if you're not careful one day, it's just going to be gone. Although my bed's good. So.
Can't fit
anyway.
It.
Love it.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. And have a great weekend again. And we'll see everybody again. Remember, in May, we go to Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. California time, 6 p.m. UK. We're switching, and Alicia will be joining as a permanent co-host starting in May. So everybody have a great weekend. Till then.
Thank you.
Peace. Peace.